Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Private Property Farming Podcast. My name is Mbali Nwoko, your host, as always, right here on the Farming Podcast. Happy holidays to each and every one of you watching us from home, watching us from your holiday destinations. It's super great, obviously, to know that we've got audience as well that constantly support the podcast right here on Private Property. Today, we're speaking about beehives and honey and the process of making honey and how do we get honey into your home. And we're speaking to an agripreneur or an entrepreneur in this space, and she's going to tell us about her company called Bee Loved Honey. So I want to know all the juices. Is she working with bee farmers? Is she a bee farmer as well? Or what type of stage or process does she operate within the agricultural value chain? And also, is she exporting a product? Is she selling locally? What type of marketing channels is she currently exploring? And any new opportunities that she's obviously also been able to capture within her market. And so, today's topic is we're talking about bringing high quality honey to the world. And I certainly hope that she's definitely selling her honey to the world. And we're speaking to none other than Lesego Serolong Holzapfel. Interesting surname, but let's get to know her. Lesego, how are you doing?
I'm good, Mbali, and thank you so much for having me. And I'm honored that this is like your last year-end show. So it's such an honor to be here.
Yeah, thank you actually for making the time during this holiday season. And I'm sure you obviously want to take a break, but as an entrepreneur, I'm sure, every moment is a great opportunity to obviously speak about your business and educate some of us who know nothing about, the honey making process and particularly your industry. So tell us about Bee Loved Honey. When did you start? And are you a bee farmer producing honey, or are you just on the third stage of the value chain?
Yeah, no, thank you, Mbali. So I got started actually in agriculture. Actually, I got more interested in about 2014, 15, when the issue of food in Africa was like a constant topic, just how much Africa imports versus the capabilities that we have. And so as part of my research, part of my goal, my husband and I started a charity 10 years ago. We offer scholarships to orphans from like remote rural areas. And so some of our scholarships are, we take them through grade 8 all the way to like grade 12 matric. Some of them are working for KPMG and they've been with us. And the constant conversation has always been, can you also help, extended family members? And areas where we go, these are like arid. Some places are not even on Google Maps, and for me, this was like a light bulb moment where I was like, you have all this land and obviously it's communal land, areas where a lot of our scholars are from. And I'm like, why aren't we utilizing like communal land? And so it was like a long process of like engaging the chiefs and actually putting together a program that focuses on horticulture. And because it's arid and we had to obviously plant things that were like drought resistant, like things like watermelon, things that were doing well. It's like always trial and error. Watermelons did so well, as well as like tomatoes, and bees were actually critical because you need bees for pollination. And I didn't know that. So my background is in social policy and entrepreneurship, from the London School of Economics. But I'm like, part of learning or getting into agriculture is it's working with people. You can't get into like an industry and work alone. So that's my journey. I didn't study agriculture or anything, but I just knew that there's money to be made in the industry, and also there's a price to pay. And that's how we realized, and that's how we realized that. Personally, bees were this big, and I got into it, and I realized that South Africa actually has production capacity of only 2,000 tons, although we consume more than 5,000 tons. And so the difference is obviously like imported, and the biggest challenge right now is it's food fraud, and a lot of honey that's imported, it's blended, it's like fake. And so the challenge is for consumers, when you go to sometimes your favorite retail store, you pick up honey from the shelf, you don't know, like you just read the label assuming that it's honey. Sometimes you'd see that it's product of China or Zambia, or there's like so many ors. And I saw that as an opportunity to actually, one, create an awareness around people, consumers being able to like know where their honey comes from, where their food comes from. Traceability is very important, but then also using that as an opportunity to create, income for secondary income for beekeepers. And so part of doing research, we realized that a lot of beekeepers were giving up because of the import prices were like too low. So for a regular beekeeper who sells their raw honey for 150 per kg or 180 per kg, it wasn't worth it when your competitor or the import was selling it for like 30 rand a kg. So we actually are facing a huge decline of like beekeepers because of this. And I so wish that our government would actually be like other countries like New Zealand that are really trying to like promote beekeeping, because it has a huge impact in terms of like income generation, especially in like, rural areas where there's less chemicals that are being used. So that's how we got started. And so we were obviously like helping. So I have a company called Bokamoso Food. So Bokamoso Food is a platform that helps farmers and we do food processing. So we do other various food products. We do tea and coffee and other beverages, and honey is one of our products as well. So we then realized that it would be so good to add honey packaging and processing into our basket of our offerings, and working with small scale farmers. And we also decided to get involved in the entire value chain because we realized that there weren't many manufacturers of beehives out there. It was so hard for us to actually make hives like ourselves, actually find the materials. So we actually make beehives. We provide training to incoming beekeepers. And it's critical that the beekeepers do well because there's a huge shortage of honey supply in the country. So it's in our best interest as well to make sure that, the beekeepers do well. So the beekeepers become part of our network as well. We also have our own hives in the Northwest Province that we place in different fields like lucerne, sunflower. The best is acacia. So if you look at honey that's getting like the highest price overseas, it's acacia honey because of its like unique properties and stuff. And areas where we're working, like in the Kalahari, for example, there's acacia trees like everywhere. And so this is like wealth. The way that we see it is like, oh my goodness, we could have hives everywhere. So that's where some of our honey comes from as well. So we have a factory. So we're, like I said, we're involved in the entire value chain, from building beehives to training beekeepers to literally processing. So we have like a factory. We built a new factory last year in the Northwest Province in Daung, in the village of Daung, where we do all the processing of the honey. So for example, every beekeeper that buys our hive, we offer them like an offtake agreement for the honey that we buy, as well as the wax that we buy, because we reuse the wax to make frames. So so in a nutshell, that's our story. And for us, we just didn't want to have, like a honey product that's there. We wanted honey that really tells the African story. So when you buy our honey, it talks about, where the honey comes from and the story of African beekeepers. And, one of our long-term goals has always been, we want to be on the shelves of like Harrods, we want to be on Whole Foods, and we want to be whatever. And we want to tell the real African story, the powerful African story of high quality honey, great branding, and it's true empowerment. Yeah. So, Lesego, I've heard Kuruman, I've heard Daung. It sounds like very, very, I know Daung is quite also a remote area. Kuruman, I've never been to Kuruman. So how do you go about educating small scale rural farmers in those areas about the importance of beekeeping and preserving bees and making honey, because we're obviously consuming more than we produce, right?
As opposed to not getting those same farmers to produce, our typical cash crops like vegetables,
right.
Where it could be like, cabbage, spinach, which is a lot in demand, onions, potatoes, carrots, or things like maize, which, a lot of us as South Africans consume. So how do you go about educating to these small-scale farmers in very remote and outskirt areas about the importance of beekeeping and keeping the bee farming alive, as opposed to not choosing the typical cash crop route?
So one of the things that we have learned, because it's a process, right, is that we are integrating indigenous knowledge, because when you go to these areas, people have been doing beekeeping for like generations, for centuries. So I'm from a farming family in Daung. So my grandfather was like a farmer and did all sorts of like farming. And it's interesting because when you go to Daung and places like Kuruman, the Northern Cape, even the arid areas, like you're talking about like Khoisan people. So there's a drink that's called like mead. It's fermented like honey drink. And it's funny because during lockdown, the sales of mead was like going up. So it's for you to make mead, you actually use like a bark of a certain tree that you find like in the rural area, and then you mix honey. So there are all these like small honey entrepreneurs that we're actually engaging with. And what's so funny is that they don't wear, the protective clothing when they go to the fields to get the honeycomb. They literally like go as they are. And their story is also like interesting. So that's also part of like our storytelling in our model as well, like integrating indigenous knowledge, how they've been doing it, and also trying to bring them to our platform in a way that they don't feel like we're reteaching them something like new. We're actually helping them to do things in a larger scale, in a much cleaner way than they would generally do. So it's been very interesting, and unfortunately, people don't see beekeeping as something that, like, they don't have knowledge. A lot of people don't have knowledge about beekeeping, where to get started, your market. Offtake is like a huge thing, right? So even when to be considered like a commercial beekeeper in South Africa, you need to have a minimum of like 200 hives. So for a lot of people of color in this country, they wouldn't, like, the industry is so small that they wouldn't even know where to start. And that's been part of like our awareness, where we're not just only teaching people the skills, but also to change some of the myths, especially in the Eastern Cape. We have farmers in the Eastern Cape where the perception of bees to them is like ancestors. So how do you gently bring people into conversation and helping them see the business side of things without, and also while in dialogue, without actually not being perceived as like coming in and sort of like telling them what to do. So there's a lot of work certainly that needs to be done in Bali, because if you look at the Americas, if you look at Europe, it's like the largest consumers of like honey like in the world, and honey is like a $1 billion business. South Africa, I think, spends more than 8 billion rand just like in honey exports and stuff. So so I think that's why we also pair the education part of it, because it's like critical, and the network part of it, the support part of it, it's very critical.
Is it safe to say that because it is in these remote areas, and you've mentioned certain elements that in certain areas people see bees as a very spiritual, and it's so ingrained in their culture. Does that mean then when you now start selling your honey, is it sold at a premium price because of the process that goes behind making that honey?
Yeah, so we've always wanted to differentiate ourselves. So it's sold at a premium price, but it is affordable. So you would find it at like niche markets. So you would not find it at, other retailers. But you will find it at like, niche markets like in Cape Town, and you can buy it online. And it's because it's not something that's like mass produced. Time has been taken to get the honey to where it is. Like there's a process, but also there's like profit, there's profit that has to go to a farmer, right? So we're not trying to like squeeze the farmers. We're selling currently, we're buying honey for like 70 rand a kg, whereas some retailers are currently buying honey from farmers for like 40 rands, 30 rand. So that's why our prices are premium, because there's a whole chain, and we want the farmer to see the benefits.
A question that I often don't ask here on the podcast, and I'm just thinking about it now, is, we tend to focus a lot about the farmer, the agripreneur in the space, obviously starting a business, trying to create a product or a service, sell it to the market. So here you are, Lesego, founder of Bee Loved Honey. You're running a business, Lesego, at the end of the day, right? You've got clients to maintain. How are you navigating the two ends of the spectrum? So running your business, but at the same time having to support and mentor and teach and also manufacture some of the beehives that you're selling to the farmers. So when I say support, mentor, teach, etc., teaching the farmers and actually getting them to think commercially, I suppose, in some instance,
right,
and the value that they could bring to your business. And at the same time, you still have your business to run. So how are you navigating all these various dynamics and challenges that you're faced with and still trying to maintain a profitable business at the end of the day?
Yeah, so luckily I have an amazing team, and I think it's very good to sort of like know your area, what you're good at in terms of like also your objective, what we want to sell premium honey that tells the African story, and sort of so that's our. And then also the second part is we need to get all the honey volumes, right? So in order for us to get the honey volumes, we need to make sure that the farmers are doing well, and there's like support, because obviously there's like, demand and supply. So if supply is low, then we're like we're out of business essentially. And so one of the things that we do in our model is we partner with organizations that are looking to like sustainably like empower communities. So, and obviously, you know, owning a beehive provides you with like annuity income. You know, lifespan of a beehive is about 5 years. And so, and that's because of like the wear and tear. It's, you know, it's always outside. And it's going to, you know, go to some of the challenges that we're facing. And so, for example, for a year, a beekeeper is looking at making around or getting 30 kgs of like honey on average. And so with us, that's about, you know, 1,800 rand if you have like one hive. And so obviously, if you have more, the more like the better. And that's how the honey business like goes. You need to reinvest, and we encourage our beekeepers to reinvest. So we work with organizations like the Mine Workers Development Agency. We're also about to launch an interesting program that we will announce and you will see, that's focused on empowering female beekeepers in SADC. And so, yeah, and so obviously these organizations then pay for women or beekeepers in remote areas to get all the training. We make our money obviously from selling hives and providing training. We, you know, the organizations usually would pay for the training if beekeepers can't pay for the training themselves. But then we also have training as like a service that we provide. So individuals that are interested in beekeeping classes, you know, they come. And so where we are in Taung, we also have accommodation like on site. So someone could do like a, you know, like Airbnb weekend experience where you learn all about beekeeping like 101, and you get to have like the hands-on experience of like processing the honey and all of that. So so we're trying to like balance the two by making you know, every area profitable in a way, but also with like impact.
Wow, that sounds amazing. And it sounds like such an interesting business to be in, learning from various farmers with diverse backgrounds in various regions and so forth. So what goes into the honey making process post-harvest?
So because of quality control, we are very, very strict. We usually don't just take honey from beekeepers. We have to like go to the site and like inspect and like see, because of the fraud that I mentioned earlier. Literally, you know, we've had cases where people would literally like just blend in like brown sugar. And I'm sure if you've watched the Carte Blanche documentary, I think it was aired last year, they were busting, you know, some of these like fraudulent people in South Africa, sadly, that were doing this. So you need to keep a promise to the consumer as well, that you are able to, what you're giving them what you're saying you're giving them, you know? So, so for example, beekeepers that are like remote, we use a service called Pudo. So these Pudo boxes you find at like petrol stations and malls. I actually just saw one in the mall today. And so there's like a last mile, like a cheaper last mile, like delivery system that we've like implemented, because, for example, when beekeepers bring in their hives, not hives, when they bring in the frames and they have honeycomb, they put it in this plastic container that we provide them. They put it in a Pudo. To get to us, it's going to cost them like 60 rand, and we're able like, and that's up to like 20 to 25 kgs of honey that they can ship. And so once we've done the processing, we obviously tell them this is how much honey we processed, you know, from your frame. This is how much wax, you know, we process, and then boom, you get your money in the account.
And how are you selling your honey? Is it under a specific brand name? And where are you selling to currently? You mentioned certain markets, but if you could please just expand a little on that.
Yeah, so we're currently selling online. We've actually spent a lot of time sort of like branding ourselves, you know, from the image side to making sure that we have the certification. So, and we've deliberately taken time to like do that instead of just like rushing and putting packaging together. So we have our new branded bottles and boxes. So we're currently at a market in Cape Town called the Oranjezicht. We're online as well if people want to buy. We're also going to be in spas in the Western Cape. So ultimately, our goal is to export our honey abroad. One, because we believe that if we share the story and the importance of beekeeping in the African continent, and also the quality that people can expect from Africa, which is one of the things that we're fighting for, right? Just changing the narrative. And so we are busy with the export certification process right now with EcoCert. And we've just completed a German export program with the GIZ. And we're talking with other people like overseas as well. So right now we're focusing on increasing our volumes, but making sure that, we're able to have sufficient volumes to export.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And why specifically export market when you're saying that locally we are importing a lot more than we're consuming? So why don't you infiltrate the local market because we're obviously in shortage?
I think it's, with our price point, the import market, the local market can be a challenge because someone would expect to get your honey for the same price as like an imported honey. And I don't blame the consumers because a lot of them, they don't know, right? So they were like, I saw honey for 30 Rand at X store. So one of the big reasons for us is, selling price, what consumers are willing to buy it for, but also South Africa, it's a big but small economy as well. I mean, if you look at the world, like America, it's like a 300 million people country, so we will literally be just like a drop, and obviously we're gaining like currency when you're selling overseas, and part of it is also to change the narrative around products that are coming from Africa. So every time I go to the US or I go to Europe, I hardly find products on the shelves that are from like made in Africa, and they are really made by Africans. Do you know what I mean? Yes. And so that's the big driver behind why we want to do what we're doing, so that we see them on the shelves of those stores overseas telling our stories.
Yeah. How easy or difficult was it to penetrate the market? Now, let's take it back from a local perspective. There's so many honey brands. I consume honey. I can think about a couple of brands that I've bought. For me, I've just never taken that huge interest to say this tastes different, because for me, it's like, oh, honey is honey. It's sweet. But how difficult or easy was it to penetrate the market with so many brands on various retail stores or in the market?
Yeah, and I think that's what formed part of the process for us, like brand identity. Yes. And where do we want to play, right? And also studying consumer behavior. And obviously we're not doing it because consumers are doing this. I think more and more people are more interested in sustainability, knowing where the honey comes from, or where the products, if it's you, Mbali, doing like green beans, or you're doing cucumbers, right? People want to know who is Mbali, who I'm buying from, and I think people are thinking about also connecting with like the individual, or in a way supporting the entrepreneur. And I think that's what differentiates us, because it's in our package. The story is in our packaging as well. If you go to our website, it's the story, it's the impact, and giving people the opportunity to participate in something like meaningful. Yeah.
And what's your biggest cost, Lesego, in your business? Because I heard obviously there's Kuruman, there's Daum. You're getting those products into your facility in Daum, and then now you're selling to the Western Cape. So is it safe to say that logistics is your biggest cost in this case?
Yeah, so we've been trying to find ways to like cut costs. Hence, we introduced like the Pudo model, which is very, very cheap. And, the Pudo boxes are in almost all remote rural areas in South Africa. So that's been like a huge cost cut for us. And then I guess the biggest cost for us has been in our packaging, you know. So when you're trying to reach a certain target market, or when you're targeting, you know, certain customers, you know, your packaging has to stand out. And we've deliberately taken time and put in resources to invest in our packaging. Like, you know, people just don't want to buy your juice or honey in this instance, and it's not, you know, like right now in December we're all like entertaining, we have our cheese boards there, and you just, even though the honey looks great, you just don't want to bring that honey. You're like, yo, so yeah, we want people to also feel good, you know, when they bring it out, they're like, yeah, it's there.
Yeah. I can imagine it's such a process because, yeah, you know, you're thinking, you're just taking honey, you're processing it, you're bottling it, and you're sending it through. But there's so much that goes behind it, understanding consumer behavior, understanding the logistics model, and obviously branding, packaging, and marketing, that all goes into play. But it sounds like you've just you've reached quite a number of milestones as well. What announcements or success stories can you tell us around Bee Loved Honey besides exports?
Yeah, so we were shortlisted on the SAB Social Innovation Awards. For us, it was such a huge milestone for us, because, you know, oftentimes people don't think about bees, you know, as something that has like impact. But if you think about food that's on your table, it's dependent on bees for like pollination, right? And not just food, but other industries as well, like cotton industry. It depends. So bees literally impact multiple industries. And you know, beekeeping is not something that's huge like in South Africa. I mean, the fruit industry depends on beekeeping, literally. You know, like farming industry, like, so. And I think the sad part is that we are facing, like, with Africa's growing population, we're facing a huge decline of honeybees because of pesticides, you know, and all these chemicals that are being used. So to your question earlier, you're like, you know, you're running a business, but also you're like creating like awareness. It's really tough. It's really tough because it's a serious problem, right? And Einstein says, you know, if honeybees were to be wiped from the face of the earth, humans would only have like 4 years to live, which goes to show that it's important that we encourage more people to, you know, to save our honeybees. And and last year we managed to build our own honey processing factory, which was hard given COVID. Like we're still, you know, in the pandemic. But for me particularly, it was super special because my dream has always been to build a factory closer to where the people are and to see our employees like walking to work. Given the South African history and context, it's so powerful. It is very powerful. And I think also looking at German markets and talking to like customers overseas, it's such a huge milestone. And it's not easy, to be honest, to run a business, you know, to market your product, talk to customers and convince them why your product, right? And also to bring in that story. And you also learn to fight. I mean, you're an entrepreneur. Like, it's not a smooth sail, but you don't give up. You keep knocking on those doors, and you never know.
Absolutely. So it's definitely tough times for an African entrepreneur, especially one in South Africa, because you're trying to grow a business, create employment, make money also for yourself, realize your dream. But then there's so many socio-economic factors that we still also have to deal with, you know, in our communities, whether it's rural or urban. And there's so many roadblocks and challenges that we also have to, go over. But Lesego, where can we find your honey? And maybe you mentioned you sell a lot online, but maybe if you could share some your social media pages, your website where people could buy online.
Yeah, so people can buy it on our website. It's www.beelovedhoney.africa. So we have like an online store there, and then on our social media, Twitter and Instagram, you can find us. So it's Bee Loved Honey Africa. And you can follow me. I usually have things buzzing going on related to like beekeeping and stuff on my personal page, Instagrams, Lesego Serolong Holzapfel, or just Lesego Serolong. I know half of my family members can't still pronounce my surname, even though it's been like 15 years.
Wow. Wow. Thank you so much, Lesego, for your time this evening. I thoroughly enjoyed the conversation. You reminded me just what we as entrepreneurs go through, and also just the importance around beekeeping. As a farmer, I know it, but you really emphasize that point, and it's quite interesting to see that we're all integrated. You're obviously selling a honey product, but there's bees involved. As a vegetable farmer, I definitely need bees, fruits, etc. So it's definitely a topic that we don't often visit or discuss. As farmers, it's always forgotten. We're always talking about the market prices and fresh produce and the rise in fuel and the impact thereof, etc. But you definitely reminded me of how important bees are. And thank you so much for your effort, for your business, and for obviously educating us around the world of bees, and obviously bringing a premium product that is, to our shelves, but also with the story behind it.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it so much, and I draw inspiration from you as well. Like being a female farmer out there, it's not easy, but like, I think, for a lot of young people looking at you and even a possibility of being involved in agriculture, it's huge. So thank you so much for that. And a huge shout out to Ndidi as well. I know you were a part of the conference. And females like you in our continent are really like amazing. So thank you so much.
Oh, thank you so much, Lesego. I thoroughly enjoyed our conversation, and all the best with your business. Hopefully you can come back next year and tell us about this surprise that you have in store. And we obviously love hearing success stories as well, and just how businesses have obviously grown throughout the months or the very difficult years. So all the best with it.
No, thank you so much. And Merry Christmas and Happy New Year.
Same to you. That was Lesego Serolong Holzapfel, founder of Bee Loved Honey. And she was telling us about a business that she started and the various regions that she's operating with, more so a manufacturing plant that she has in Dawong. And I think, starting a business, you're not isolated as an entrepreneur. There's a whole community that you need to be involved with to get your product going. And in her case, she's working alongside beekeepers, small-scale rural beekeeping farmers, but also educating them on the importance of PPE, looking after themselves as much as they look after their bees, and obviously also getting the quality that is needed. So a huge shout out to her for obviously uplifting our communities, but also telling us the stories, because indigenous knowledge doesn't come by as easily, or we don't hardly talk about it. But if you want to follow Lesego, she mentioned all their social media handles of Bee Loved Honey. I think it's www.beelovedhoney.africa. That's where they sell their honey online. Go and support a proudly South African brand. And I think let's get it in each and every one of our households this December, and give her feedback, but just know that when you're buying Bee Loved Honey, you're also supporting many, many communities out there. So thank you so much for your time this evening, for watching us. Catch this episode on our YouTube channel, the Private Property YouTube channel, under the Farming Podcast. This is episode 115. And happy holidays to you. And I'll see you on the next episode of the Farming Podcast. Take care.